Shalom and welcome again to Seekers of Meaning, the podcast TV arm of Jewish Sacred Aging. I'm your host, Rabbi Address. Thank you very, very much for joining us on today's edition. As you know, we want to explore aspects and issues related to our own longevity, not only within the Jewish community, but the general community, our families and our organizations. And we are delighted to welcome to the show today an expert in all of these fields, an absolute all of these fields. We want to welcome an old friend of ours, Dr. Rick Moody, who has been working in the field of elder care gerontology for a few years. Author of many books. Right back there over my right shoulder is The 5 Stages of the Soul. Author of ongoing 2 major newsletters, which I'm going to ask you about, one on the soul and aging, and one specific to what we want to talk about at the beginning on climate, and the author of a brand new book, Climate Change in an Aging Society, being published by Routledge Press, now available. Rick, how you doing? Nice to see you. So
I'm doing well.
There's so much to talk about right now.
Yes.
But let's start with the basics. The new book, Climate Change in an Aging Society, you write a regularly scheduled newsletter on this issue with the same name. What drew you to activism in the area of climate, specifically as it relates to our generation, older people?
Right. Well, let's start with 1960. I'm not going to tell the whole story of my life, but in that year, I got my award as an Eagle Scout.
Oh, congratulations.
With a Nature Merit Badge. And then I went to sleep for about 50 to 60 years, meaning I wasn't paying attention because I assumed that, the world in the future would be pretty much like the world that I grew up in. I was born in 1945, last year of the war, as we called it. And it's not that way anymore. Really, it's not. It's not that way anymore. And with regard to climate issues, the world that surrounds us all the time, it's very different. And there's a lot of people my age, our age, Rabbi Richard, who don't get it. And then there are others who do. And I go back about 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I was giving a talk on environmental issues at a senior center in Hamden, right near New Haven, Connecticut. And I gave a pretty good talk, I thought. And afterwards, we're going out of the room, and an older woman, they tend to be older people and senior centers, said, "Oh, Dr. Moody, I loved your presentation. It was really so powerful." She said, "I'm just glad I won't live to see it."
Well, thank you very much.
And I thought, I didn't know what to say. And I've kind of thought about that ever since. And in a way, it prompted me to write the book, because I said, if I had said to her what I should have said, I would have said 4 words: here, now, you, hope. In other words, I would have said, wait a minute, you have lived long enough to see it. Recently, here in California, not near me, we had terrible fires in Los Angeles, in LA. And some years ago, that is going back more than 10 years, 20 years, when I was with AARP, I used to work for AARP for nearly 10 years. They sent me down to New Orleans right after Hurricane Katrina, because 2/3 of the people who died in Hurricane Katrina were over the age of 65. And nobody was prepared for this. Nobody knew why. Nobody knew what was coming. So these things are happening. They're happening here. They're happening now. They're happening to you or to people you care about, you love. On the last point, hope. Well, what is hope? Some people think hope is, something will turn up, as Mr. Micawber said in Charles Dickens. That's not hope. That's illusory thinking. That's fantasy land. Hope, as the great environmentalist David Orr said, hope is a verb with its sleeves rolled up. Hope is a verb with its sleeves rolled up. So right now, if we're doing things on camera, I should roll up my sleeves and say, okay, no, not literally. but figuratively. What do we do about all this? And some people just turn off. They say, okay, something will work out, something will turn up. That is not a good response for people who are grandparents, and I'm a professional grandfather, so I care about the future, and so do you, and so do most people, but we don't know what to do. And that's why I wrote the book.
So
And that's
in the
why I
book,
do
you
what I
have
do.
a whole series of chapters. You talk about fires, floods, heat, drought, aspects
You got them.
of really there. It's not a fiction. Just read the newspapers, watch TV every single day. And it's despite some people saying the global warming is not real, we seem to be living it. So the people our age who may turn around and say, that's going to really be my children's and grandchildren's problem. There's really nothing more that I could do. I'm 75, I'm 80, I'm 65 years old. There's nothing more I can do. How do we respond to that?
That's exactly the right question to ask. And it's a question that's sometimes asked, but more often it's felt but not asked. Because I think it was Thoreau who said, each man lives a life of quiet desperation. And what is quiet desperation? It doesn't mean feeling bad. It means turning away from the things you don't want to think about. And we all do it. We all do it because we need our defense mechanisms. So I'm not in the business of trying to demolish all defenses. That's not possible. But what is possible is to do it incrementally. And that's why I tell people I'm a radical incrementalist. And we can do things about climate, but we got to do it step by step. And we got to, as the environmentalist slogan is, think globally, but act locally. What you're doing in New Jersey is a different story than my story here in San Mateo. Actually, when it comes to the ocean, it's the same story because you're not far from the Jersey Shore. I know it very well. I've been there more than once. And I'm only 2 miles from the Pacific Ocean. I'm actually 2 miles from the San Andreas Fault, too, which is, that's earthquake, not caused by climate, but here we are. Yeah, you raised the right question at the question people are asking. So we have to have
the ocean thing. I'm constantly struck because we have an escape place on the ocean, and just the changes in the ocean levels and the melting of the glaciers. There still doesn't seem to be this connection on the part of so many people that this is all interconnected. That this planet
it's interconnected.
It's not isolated silos of issues of climate issues. It is it's all interrelated. That melting glacier in Greenland affects the tides, affects the Gulf Stream, affects the climate, because the climate already is changing in the United States. Is it not?
It is. It is, and it changes in different ways in different parts of the country. So it's going to be different in New Jersey, where you are, than it is for me near the San Francisco Bay Area. By the way, in our area, right here where I'm sitting at this very spot where I'm sitting in San Mateo, California, we've had atmospheric rivers. I never even knew the word atmospheric river until a year or two ago when our entire house was flooded. Entire house was flooded in an atmospheric river. Now, it wasn't just the cause of the clouds or the rain or the precipitation. There are other reasons. And that brings me to my key point, which is that we're all affected in different ways. You may not have an atmospheric river in New Jersey, but you'll have something else, a hurricane. And we don't have them here on the West Coast. So there are differences. We can't act as if it's all the same. It's not all the same. It's here, wherever you are, and it's now, maybe not this year, but next year, and it's there. That's the point. It's there.
You've been involved in this for so many years and have a perspective. Look, last month, the new administration, one of the first acts, if not the first act, was to bail again on the Paris Climate Accords.
It's true.
How do we model locally this awareness and activism, if the government basically says no?
That's the federal government. It's not every state government. Here in California, we have an extremely progressive, forward-looking government, not just the governor, but it includes the legislature, includes a lot of people. And part of the reason is that we are threatened in a way that is very obvious. The wildfires that we had recently in Los Angeles. You know, when I first moved here, and I haven't lived in California my whole life. I'm a New Yorker, basically. I grew up on Long Island, got my graduate work at Columbia, and lived and worked in the City University of New York for 20, 25 years. But I then eventually worked for AARP, eventually retired, went to Boulder, Colorado, and then came here. Well, here in California, the first time I got here 4 years ago, I went on a climate march. Nancy Pelosi, former Speaker of the House, her house is here. So we said, oh, well, we had several hundred young people in Sunrise. But they had some of the old people, too. So I'm one of the elders who went with them. They welcomed us, actually. This particular group welcomed us. And I'm walking along, and there's a woman, not old, not young, middle-aged. And she was wearing kind of a uniform of a ranger, and it turns out she's a forest ranger. And I said, oh, where are you from? And she said, well, I used to live in Paradise, California. Paradise. It's not what the word signifies, is it? Because everything burned down. In fact, her whole house burned down, 100% gone. So, of course, she's marching. Now, most people are not in that situation. In fact, I'm not in that situation. It's dark here right now. So if I were to point out the window, which I'm doing, it's barely light because it's just getting light. It's 3 hours different. So just as we have difference of time zones, we have difference of climate zones. But you made the point at the very beginning, Richard, that it's connected because the atmosphere doesn't respect boundaries and the ocean doesn't respect boundaries. So we have to begin where we are and work differently in different places,
Right.
different countries too, by the way, because I'm true there. So you've made the right point.
So this
It's an important
interconnectedness
point.
and also, like you said, think globally but act locally. So the activism from and in what you're writing and speaking about really reflects back on don't get politicized, but be involved politically on a local level. You will basically have more of an opportunity or chance to impact change locally than you're going to then obviously right now on a national federal level. So
Yeah, that's exactly right. But I think when people get demoralized by something at that national level or international, by the way, because some people will talk about the COP arrangements and say, well, nothing really came of it. I think that's important to think globally, but it's also important to look for the opportunities. You know, Peter Drucker, the great management theorist, who actually began as a philosopher, by the way, I have to say that since that's my background. He said, feed the opportunities, starve the problems. Feed the opportunities, starve the problems. There can be different opportunity here where I live and where you live. There are going to be different opportunities. Bob Loeb, who is the guy, he lives in New Jersey. He's the guy who organized the National AARP Climate Action Program as a petition with thousands and thousands of signatures now. We'll see what happens. AARP has a new CEO. We'll see what she wants to do. But we have to be there and operate at the local level, at the national level, and even at the global level. And we have to do all simultaneously, but not in as much intensity. Right now, we have to focus more locally.
I'm pleased that so many congregations, synagogues, churches, mosques, in sometimes smaller and sometimes larger ways, are picking up this mantle and saying, like, we can't solve the problem totally, but we can reinforce recycling. We have in the congregation that I teach at a lot, there's a whole group that really is pushing this idea of composting. Just small little, but
Yes.
incrementally, one thing leads to another, as the tradition says, one mitzvah leads to another mitzvah. The oceans, I'm sure you've seen pictures of people just organizing, picking up trash on the ocean. I know in Florida, where our condo is, there's a huge attempt to really get all this plastic bags out of the ocean because of the turtles and the fish, all this environmental interconnectedness. So I think if your message really is just just take care of your own home, just take care of your own community, your own neighborhood, and if everybody starts to do that, the change will come.
Yes, it's true. But I want to, like a small point of difference between what you just said. Yes, we need to be focused locally. We need to cultivate our garden, as Voltaire said. But we can't just do that. You have to be thinking. You and I have two eyes. We look in two different directions simultaneously. If we didn't do that, we'd be one-eyed. That's not good because we can't see the depth of things. The same with action. We need to be looking in two directions. The larger level, whether it's state level, national level, whatever, and then the local, the things where people we know. In your condo, for example. Let's take the example that you gave. You gave this example of plastic and oceans. Because where does the plastic come from? Where does it come from? It comes from oil. It's all fossil fuels. That's where it originates. And that great movie, I've forgotten the title of it, but it was 1967, and which the one character says, "What's the future?" He says, "Well, it's plastics."
Yeah. One of the great movies. Dustin Hoffman,
and one of the great movies.
Yes.
And by the way, what just happened with us, I couldn't remember that the movie was The Graduate, but you remembered it. So this is what I call collaborative cognition. That's my term for it.
I have to remember that's a great term.
We've been married for... It's not copyrighted. Run with it. Collaborative cognition, what does it mean? It means that we don't try to be local or individual entirely. We need to be local, we need to be individual, but not entirely. We need to collaborate with others. I'll tell you a great story about this. Jane Goodall. Jane Goodall, I had the great good fortune, the great privilege to introduce her to the entire AARP National Conference. This is going back 10 or 12 years. And she had a colleague who didn't work with the monkeys that she did, but rather with baboons. And this was a woman also in Africa. And she lived with the baboons. They took her in. They accepted her. And one day she was with them and she fell asleep. And when she woke up, the baboons were gone. They disappeared. They'd gone on to the next oasis, the next place. But one baboon stayed behind. They left a male baboon to stay with her, and his job was to guide her to the next location, which he did. Now that's an example of something not in human beings. The things that we have, we're not just human animals. We're connected with all species. And we have an example and with the baboons, with this lady, of what we can be to one another. We can help one another, whether it's collaborative cognition or some other form of collaboration. I'll give you one other example. We had an event here in California, actually in the same town that Apple is located in, and had nothing to do with Apple, but it was a conference, small conference, on intergenerational climate advocacy. It turned out that the guy who did all the planning, all of the technology for it, was 17 years old. I'll tell you his name, Jaden Wan, okay? His parents are immigrants. He knew all the technology. I didn't know the technology. I can barely get on the program that we're on now. It was the first time I'm usually on Zoom, so oh my God, a new program. It's not what I'm used to. Well, that's a reaction that some elders have, and I'm one of those elders. But Jaden Wan, along with others, was able to work with older people. He's 17 years old. Most of the people in the room were in their 70s or 80s, but another group were middle-aged. So we brought all three generations together, the youth, the midlifers, and the elders. And now we're taking that successful model and replicating it. And by the way, it's probably going to be done in New Jersey somewhere. I'll talk to you about it. Yeah, we're going to do it. We're going to do it because we have to do it locally, and we have to focus on bottom-up change,
Absolutely.
which is appropriate. And that's why we shouldn't be disappointed by Donald Trump. First time I've used that name. That's okay. He's going to be around. He's been around for a while. I'm a New Yorker. We saw him years ago in the 1980s. We saw him all the time.
So one of the things that you write about, and again, we're talking to Dr. Rick Moody, the author of Climate Change in an Aging Society, now available, published by Routledge Press, and I imagine available at all the usual locations. A great cover, by the way. And I like, and the
yeah,
really, because the hands around the globe, it just manifests that concept of interconnectedness. And generational,
that's why
and the generations to generations. You write about, and you just spoke about that last thing about hope. Are you hopeful that this climate issue?
Hopeful. Yes, I'm hopeful, but I'm not optimistic. For one thing, like the weather, right now, and may not be true after February 14th when this show is broadcast, we're going to have different weather. Okay, right now we're having a huge cold snap in the United States, all over this country. And we've had these atmospheric rivers here in California. Am I hopeful? Yes, I'm hopeful, but not on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis, or year-to-year. I'm not hopeful for the next 4 years from Washington. I was surprised in the last 4 years that Joe Biden, an elder, by the way, was successful in getting the Inflation Reduction Act. That law is not going away. Too many people are now invested in it and engaged in it. Too much money is flowing in that direction. So, yes, it's possible to be hopeful and to act about things that you care about. That's what I meant when I said hope is a verb with its sleeves rolled up. It means we look to the things where we have an opportunity to act, not belly aching about what's going on in Washington.
Right.
That's social media.
I think,
whatever it is.
I think that message of like we said, don't bellyache about it and sit around and having a cup of coffee complaining about it and saying oy vey. Go out, go out and do something about it, and dream the dream. Which leads me to one other question I wanted to get to you before we run out of time. You're doing a lot of work with something that's absolutely fascinating to us, coming right out of the Bible, the idea of dreams and dreams in the second half of life where we are. Why? What's the difference between my dream at age 80 and my dream at age 30?
That's the question I'm asking, and I'm writing an entire book under contract with Inner Traditions Press called The Hidden Power of Dreams for the second half of life. I'm not going to talk about the details of it, not because it's secret, but just because it would take us too long. But I want to say one thing about the Jewish tradition. There's a Jewish saying, and you, as a rabbi, will know where it comes from, that a dream uninterpreted is like a letter unopened. Okay? Talmud, wherever it comes from, it's absolutely true. So dreams show us what we already know, but do not yet see. I'll give you one brief example of a dream that I had. This is 2 years ago. It was a climate dream. And I was in my house, the same house that I'm in right now. But I was asleep and I woke up and I smelled smoke. So I looked around and finally I found in the kitchen, it was smoke. There was a fire. And so I grabbed the fire extinguisher, but it didn't work. And so I said, well, we got trouble here. So I picked up my cell phone, but my cell phone didn't connect with anybody. So then I said, well, I got to get out of here, this fire. So I tried to open the windows. The windows didn't open. Everything was closed. So then I said, I need to leave. The door didn't open. And then I woke up. That's a purely negative dream.
Yeah.
It's a nightmare. It is. It doesn't happen to me every day, but it's also a warning. And people have nightmares because their nightmare is sending them a signal. And that dream sent me a signal about what's really happening right here. Here, now, you hope. So it told me it's time for action. And shortly after that dream, I made a deal with Rutledge to write this book.
You sent me something about this, and you have this wonderful phrase, the power to prepare, to adapt, to cope, to transcend, all hidden within us like a GPS system operating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to show us what we need to see. Our dreams are like a GPS system?
Yeah, that's my metaphor. And it's one I really believe. I'm about to go, as I told you, an hour or so from now to Stanford, and I got it on my GPS because I've been to Stanford. I'm only a half hour from Stanford, where I'm sitting right now. I hate to say that since I'm a Yale graduate, but, Stanford's a great institution. And a GPS tells us where we are and tells us where we might want to go. It doesn't take us there. That's action. Okay? A GPS doesn't take you. You can look at your phone and look at the GPS all day long. You never go anywhere. You have to go. You have to move. And that's action. So that's what I meant when I said action is all about it. Hope is a verb with its sleeves rolled up. That's a metaphor. It's an allegory. Just as the GPS is an allegory. We're talking about the actual world that we live in. The actual world, which is a world filled with these threats, whether it's from the new administration in Washington or the climate or the oceans. The threats are there. We shouldn't deny it. We also shouldn't deny our mistakes. And this is something that I think many in the Democratic Party are now concerned about. The Republicans should be worried about it too, because at some point they'll run into problems, blunders, and they're going to have to look back and say, wait, how did we get it wrong? Do it in advance. Have your nightmare at night and get the message that way, because that's what it means that a dream is a message, is a letter unopened. That's the Jewish tradition.
I just found it fascinating. I think this. I'm looking forward to your book. But dreams are such an integral part of Torah. Jacob, Joseph, the dream interpretations, but the idea that they are little glimpses into reality, and the GPS. I think it's a very, very interesting. Why do you think, Rick, so many people are afraid to deal with their dreams? They'll just.
Well, I hate to criticize the Christians, since that was my original tradition. I'm more global now than that, but it all happened from in the 4th century when St. Jerome mistranslated some words about dreams from Hebrew into Latin. And he got it wrong. He thought dreams were demonic. So the church and the Christian tradition mostly turned away from dreams. Not all, but many. They had a skeptical attitude. That was not true for the Torah. That was not true, by the way, for the Islamic tradition. It's not true for the Buddhist tradition. But what's going on today is different. It's not that people have religious objections to dreams. They have other objections, and their objection is dreams. It's all nonsense. I deal with reality, with what's out there, not what's in my head. They misunderstand, because what's in our head, the unconscious, if you like, the shadow element in us, that's vitally connected to what's out there. It's one of the reasons why politics has really turned into something demonic, because people are fully polarized. They convert other people into enemies. This is true on both the left and the right, by the way. It's not helpful. It's not helpful.
Now understand these dreams that it's sort of like when the deflector shields are down in the middle of the night. The deflector shield,
it's a good analogy.
The deflector shields come down, and the reality of what's really up here is allowed to come out.
Yeah.
And then we wake up and we put the shields back up because maybe it's too frightening to really deal with the truth, or what the subconscious is telling us the truth is.
It's true.
So I'm looking forward to what's the name of do you have a title for the book?
It's called The Hidden Power of Dreams. for the second half of life. And the
But
reason
don't
why
leave
I
me.
call it that,
Don't leave me.
no,
Oh,
I'm not going anywhere. I just wanted to
oh,
room
okay.
to get another book, which is
Yes, she did
this is by
she did
Connie
a
Zweig.
podcast for us. Yeah. Yeah.
She did. I didn't even know that. Well, Connie Zweig is the
Right.
one who came up with that title. I just called it the power. I just called it Dreams for the Second Half of Life. And she said, no, Rick, why don't you call it The Hidden Power of Dreams? And I said, you're right. That's a great title, because hidden power talks about ourselves. What is it in us that is hidden, that could be a power, that could have action? Back to my point about action. That's the great pragmatist tradition in America. William
Well,
James,
that dream
and
of
people like that.
of a better climate and who we shall be and who we hope to be. Thank you very much, Dr. Rick Moody. Again, Climate Change in an Aging Society, available now at all where you usually get your books, either online at the Amazon, Barnes & Noble, whatever. And before we leave, real fast, the 2 newsletters, mention them and how somebody could access them.
I do one on positive aging, human values in an aging society, goes to 5,000 people every month. And another one, Climate Change in an Aging Society, goes to 1,200 people every week. And just send me an email message, hrmoody@yahoo.com, hrmoody@yahoo.com, and I'll send you a sample. I never put people on the list unless they see a sample and say, I like this, I want to receive it. Doesn't cost any money. I never do anything with emails, and I never sell anything.
Right.
I'm not in my publisher
And
sells
I get
books,
both of those
not me.
newsletters, so I will tell you if you're interested in it. It's comes in your inbox. It's real easy, and it's really a lot of good
Very
practical information, that the websites, conferences, thought
Yes.
pieces from a variety of different perspectives. So
That's right.
HR Moody, Moody at yahoo.com.
At yahoo.com.
Rick, thank you very, very much. And drive safe to
Thank you,
Stanford,
Rabbi
and,
Richard.
and
I
enjoy
being with you.
the weather out there. Thank you. To all of you, thank you very, very much for joining us on today's edition of Secrets of Meaning, the podcast arm of Jewish Sacred Aging. We welcome your comments and suggestions. Just email me, Rabbi Address, at jewishsacredaging.com. If you go to the website, jewishsacredaging.com, there's a conveniently located donate button. If you'd like to support these podcasts and our work, just click on it, follow the directions. It's really, really, really simple. If you'd like to become a sponsor for some of these podcasts, again, just email me. We'll take it from there. Secrets of Meaning is produced at the Broadcast Center of Lubetkin Media Companies in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. And a shout out to our producer, Steve Lubetkin. Till we see each other again on the next Secrets of Meaning, take care. Thank you very, very much for joining us, for giving us your time. And most important of all, be kind to one another. Shalom.